citizenship in contemporary societies with these inequalities. Thank you very much.
I really think we are learning with young people, women from Mannenberg, women from Kalmyk, as academics from the South, we have lots to learn here. Now we are having Professor Praveen Jha, who is an economist, and he comes from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Praveen is also the editor of Agrarian South, Journal of Political Economy. This journal is an important achievement we have had in the last 3 years, we have been running this project, and the journal is an attempt exactly to bring all these concerns we have, and as Claudio has shown us, we are still struggling to make or to spread our theoretical considerations and our political engagement. So my presentation on Praveen is also an invitation to all of you to contribute to Agrarian South.
Let me first of all express my gratitude to Professor Gustavo Ribeiro and his team, organizing team, for giving this opportunity to me to participate in this excellent conference. A wonderful place to be in, fantastic events around us, and it is with a lot of humility that I say this, that it is an excellent occasion for all of us to learn from each other. Now, as regards the theme which was suggested, basically as the vantage point of political economy, I want to make the presentation which you have here. But before that, a question which has been coming up since the last 2 days: are such comparisons, whether they are meaningful at all? Does it make sense to talk of BRICS? In fact, one can take it to an extreme, and as Emanuel Wallerstein once, talking of India, said, does India exist? In mid-80s, he made this very provocative statement, given his commitment to the so-called the world system. Countries were non-existent. Right? Now, clearly, that is one level of generality where you want to make certain arguments, and then, of course, you can keep going down to lower levels of generality, and one can surely say that even talking of India, which is actually a subcontinent, is something which is so impossible. Kerala is very different from Uttar Pradesh, which is very different from Bihar, which is very different from Jammu and Kashmir, and so on and so forth. So where do you really stop? Now, coming to, for instance, I think a question which Eduardo was asking yesterday, does it make sense to include India at all in the BRICS sort of framework? Right? Now, there are social, economic geographies within India which are eminently comparable to social, economic geographies within Brazil. Parts of India which, in terms of whole range of indicators, would actually seem as if they are part of some conception of, let's say, a developed zone, developed entity, etc., socio-economically, and so on and so forth. And likewise, you can take pockets from here and compare them to the worst there. Right? So basically, the point that I'm trying to make is comparative analysis is extremely enriching. And the real question is, as has been said by my predecessors, that how do you deal with the difficulties of it? Instead of sort of posing this question whether they're comparable or not, etc., etc. And the real challenge is how do we go about it? In my presentation, what I'm doing is to basically, as I said, looking at it from the vantage point of an economist, looking at it in terms of macroeconomic policy regimes, focusing my story there, and then asking what do we get out of it in terms of comparative lessons, etc. Okay, so what we have effectively in last couple of decades or so, 2 to 3 decades or so, is that there is a huge change in overall macroeconomic policy regime and associated development agenda in the global economy. BRICS, as you will recall, Jim O'Neill in fact had mentioned this in a semi-serious fashion. He was not even serious about it. Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs, who sort of when talked of the first four, and South Africa is the latecomer to the BRICS grouping, but the first four, when he talked of it in 2001, sort of he was looking at some of the new sources, new drivers of growth, etc. And in that context, he was not really serious about the comparability and so on and so forth. And to begin with, it was just an acronym, but in the last decade or so, we noticed that it's emerging as some kind of work in progress, as an alliance, etc. And we can talk about some of those aspects of these countries. What we notice in the last decade or so, couple of decades, that BRICS has sort of experienced sustained economic growth, and in fact it is being looked upon as the new driver of growth in the global context. As it happens, the nature of accumulation under neoliberal regime in the global economy as well as these economies tends to put pressure on a whole range of basic well-being indicators of the masses. Obsession for growth and market fundamentalism has taken hold of the development agenda, with equity, employment, socio-economic inclusion and justice taking a backseat in almost all these countries. And I would amplify on some of these as we go along. If you look at where they are placed in an economic sense, 43% of the world's population, 17% of global trade, and in terms of purchasing power parity, about 25% of global GDP. Right? They currently generate almost half of the growth of the world economy and account for almost 1/3 of the global foreign reserves. Major institutional transitions and changes like national independence or revolution in their economic structure since the World War had created certain kinds of structures. What we witnessed in the last couple of decades is that significant shift from a state-led, largely a state-led, state-driven to a market economy. That is, at different points this happened. But if you look at the last couple of decades, this gives you some idea of what is their GDP over the last 2 decades or so. And this is in sort of exchange rate terms. This is not purchasing power parity. That's why here the figure in the last column is lower than what I mentioned earlier, 25%. Now, if you look at their share, on the whole, basically they have doubled their share in the global economy during this period, and each one of these countries have also tended to increase their sort of individual shares substantially. Right? So, the numbers are there for you. I need not read them here. If you look at individual countries and some of their features, Brazil, sort of in Latin America, clearly the most advanced industrial sectors, supplier of commodities and natural resources, relatively high current account deficit. This is something which is a feature of 3 of the BRICS countries, and this is precisely an outcome of the way they got integrated in the global neoliberal economic regime, and we can talk about that if you're interested. Right? So, rising CAD due to strong import for booming domestic demand. It took advantage of rising global demand before crisis, starting 2007 or so. Recently, it's been hit by leveling out of commodity prices. Russia sustained growth of 1 decade before economic crisis, that is starting 2007-8. Russia and China are the 2 countries where they have current account surplus, again because of very specific features of those economies. Basically, in case of Russia, This is on account of export of natural resources. In case of China, there's a different factor. I'll come to that later. India had impressive growth rate of about 9% from 2003 to 8. In fact, second only to China in the last 35 years or so. China has had the fastest growth in the last 35 years, followed by India, which is roughly 60% on an average of the Chinese growth rate. Recent years, last 3 years in particular, growth has tended to take a beating, and in the most recent phase, this currency crisis is something which is troubling Indian economy quite a lot, which is connected with the problem of current account deficits, and in the course of discussion maybe I can explain that in greater detail. China, it became the second largest economy in the world in 2010, overtaking Japan. Attracted impressive foreign investment, commodity export-led growth of double-digit for a very, very long period before the crisis of 2007-8 onwards. That growth has slowed down a bit in the last 5 years or so. Current account surplus, precisely because of the fact that they managed to take advantage of the global demand for their manufacturing entities, and that is a remarkable success story in terms of taking advantage of that for pushing for double-digit growth and so on. In the last 5 years, China has been rethinking about its growth strategy because of a kind of a crisis which has become quite prominent in its rural areas, and that is part of the problem of this kind of growth trajectory. South Africa, consistent growth from let's say 2003-8, it was 4 to 5%. Increasingly important industrial and geopolitical power in African continent, and that is why it becomes part of the BRICS in terms of their design. Current account deficit, as in case of India and Brazil, is a serious problem, and again it has a lot to do with their path dependence trajectories from the past, the way they have evolved. If we look at, this is just to give you a comparison at over 2000 to 2010 in terms of their GDP in purchasing power parity, billion US dollar, and GDP per capita. If you look at GDP growth rates, again we see that there are very impressive numbers there. Even in the context of the crisis, that is 2007-8 to 2008-9, which was the worst period of the crisis,